Today we're looking at Robert Oster's Green Olive. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Robert Oster's Green Olive is a very light olive, kind of golden olive color, but I guess you could call it green. Sure. Now, to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Pilot Metropolitan with a medium nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is a chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and I immediately dunk it into water for 10 to 15 seconds, and we see it flees up the page. Now, we really don't see very much of the green. We see much more of the yellow. It's green olive, but I think only when it comes through in shading. Otherwise, it's very much really a yellow ink to me. But that's, dealer choice, I guess. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And we see that it doesn't flee up. It spreads much more evenly as it moves up, which makes me feel that, strangely, this yellow ink might have just a little bit of hold on. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard they might be to clean from your pens. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Now, the highlighter it handles very well, which you would not think that an ink this light would highlight well, but this one does. Now, there is some spreading that occurs, but all of the writing is still perfectly readable, which is quite nice. Water, 3 days after, only 30 seconds on the page. Most of this ink gets pulled up. We see the dots coming through. This is largely because of how light this particular ink is. I feel like water might be all that's needed, but then when we look at the pen flush, we see it does everything water does, but I see some areas right between some of the dots where I'm seeing the white of the paper come through. Now, while the water had a little bit of hold on, the flush has some hold on, but it's 30 seconds, and I do see some of the white of the paper. So there might be a need. It's just such a light ink. There might be a need to use pen flush. Bleach is not necessary for this. As you see, it completely obliterates it off the page. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Robert Oster's Green Olive has a viscosity of 2.25, making it normal. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with the medium and extra fine nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Robert Oster's Green Olive has an average dry time of 13 seconds, making it right on the edge of normal. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does offer some shading. Very gradual shading. It's a nice color up there. We go to the extra fine and it gets much lighter, and to me, really too light to use on a regular basis. But the extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It has no shading in the writing, almost no shading. I mean, there are some spots that are a little bit darker. The K is a little bit darker. The left side of B is a little bit darker. The H, E, and the is a little bit darker. But it's so light, all of this writing, that the shading, while, there's a little there, it doesn't, there's only a few spots. It doesn't really pop. 6 seconds to dry. The medium, noticeably darker tone, much nicer to use on broader, wetter pens. The medium has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It does offer quite a bit of shading. Quick shows a lot, showing dark to light to dark again. Brown stays nice and dark and then gets light at the very end. Fox starts light and gets dark. Nice shading here. A really nice color when it's put down wetter. 17 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show us color variation. We did get color variation, really not very much with the extra fine, much more in the scrubby. The smear test says you likely can't recover this because it's such a light ink. Tomoe River. Now, except on the scrubby where I put it stupid thick, we have no bleeding. We have almost no ghosting. The ink is so light. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread. It does have halo the whole way through. It's been outlined and it looks very nice up here. It has no sheen and really no shading. The extra fine, a noticeably lighter tone, again too light for me to actually use, has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. There is absolutely no shading in this. It took 15 seconds to dry. The medium, a darker tone again. I still think this is just a little too light to use for anything kind of regular. But the medium offers no feather, spread, halo, sheen, almost no shading. There is little bits of shading. The shows a little bit of shading, but it goes from, unreadable light to dark enough to read. That's the shading that it's offering, and it's unfortunate that it's going from a too light to, almost too light to read. 21 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine and the medium do show color variation. We got none in the extra fine. The medium shows color variation that we, didn't get. It's not really. Only when it's too light to read does it show up. The scrubby shows you can't recover this if you write this on Tomoe River. So Rhodia. Rhodia gives us no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen. It does have a little bit more shading than we've seen before. A bit nicer, although the color itself to me is still a little too light to use for just regular writing with this type of nib. But it does offer shading throughout the writing. 7 seconds to dry. The medium, noticeably darker tone, much nicer color. No feather, spread, halo, sheen. Yes, we get shading all over the writing. It's very nice. Very nice shading here. 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine and the medium shows color variation. We really didn't get it with the extra fine. The smear test, it's such a light ink, I don't think you could recover it. So the TWSBI notebooks. We got no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gave no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine is still too light to, really want to have to read a page of this. It had no feather, spread, halo, sheen, no shade, 9 seconds to dry. The medium showed some spread. There was some spread with the medium. It had no feathering, no halo, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 12 seconds to dry. The scrubby showed us color variation. We didn't get it here. I know it looks more on camera. In person, that quick, that looks like it has some shading, doesn't. That lighter spot of the J is where I put my thumb, so that's not really, that's the oils from my fingers. But in person, there's no shading here. 12 seconds to dry. The smear test says you likely can't recover it. Again, it's just because it's such a light ink. Franklin Christoph paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 had no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. It is a very nice tone here. Really very nice tone right here. Noticeably lighter tone. Again, I don't want to have to read a page of this. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It took 8 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone that I got with the extra fine that I really don't care for. With no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby on camera shows color variation, in person doesn't. I didn't get any color variation up here in the smear test. You likely could not recover this. And that's all that I have for the writing sample. Instead of finding inks that look like Robert Oster's Green Olive, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, being a very light tone, although very flat in its tone, I wanted something very bright to really go with it. I chose Diamine's Florida Blue because blue and this kind of golden yellow, although they call it green olive, this kind of golden yellow with that blue look amazing together. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. Now, what do I think of Robert Oster's Green Olive? While it does shade nicely, you need to use it in a very wet pen, probably a broader pen, maybe even a stub. You need to experiment to make sure that you're going to be able to read this without any kind of problems. Because when you use it in finer nibs, it is painful on your eyes to actually read it. Thanks for watching.